Dude, I feel like a barbershop quartet right now.
As soon as we start talking, people will hear what we're saying.
Yep.
So talk really loudly.
Yeah.
The best session you've ever seen in your life is happening in the Culture Hub right now. Earth Stewardship,
Don't miss
massively important. You 4 people in front, you should totally come in when you have a chance. All right, cool. Tell your friends.
This is so great.
This is the most awesome thing you've ever seen in your life. It's gonna happen.
Mic check, mic check. This is.
Bring him up a little bit. Bring him,
Yeah.
well,
Can
that's
everybody
all right.
hear me?
Nah,
Got you, buddy.
A little more loud.
a little, there you go.
All right. A little bit louder now. A little bit louder now.
ones instead.
That deep diaphragm.
Don't be afraid of it.
This is breathwork, Earth Stewardship.
Yeah.
Vocal presence workshop.
Steward your own earth.
This reminds me of speaking of the summit vote, our time slot was at 9 a.m. after the biggest meeting. I was like, well, I got on the vote for free.
9 a.m.
All right. Well, I think we'll just go ahead and get the ball rolling. Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Wesley. I work with an organization called NEXUS. We partner with the Do Lab and ISIS and Eve to help curate portions of this festival, bring some thought leadership. This panel specifically is about Earth Stewardship. Each of these 3 guests works with a nonprofit that stewards the earth in its own way, in its own sector, and they're going to share how they're doing that, and then we'll probably open it up for Q&A and see where the intersection is. And then really what we'd like to do is find some solutions. A lot of these talks are about the issues that we're dealing with, but this one is really about the solutions. So we'll get it going, and just to start off, we'd like to just thank the organizers and the indigenous owners of this land, our stage manager, and everybody who built what we're enjoying this village for these 5 days. So thank you. It's a moment of gratitude. Okay, Lauren, tell us about yourself and how you're helping steward the earth.
Sure. Yeah, for the last, I'd say, 10 years, I've been on a journey of learning how to reconnect to the planet. I have a degree in international studies, and I think I was massively affected by UNICEF commercials as a kid. I was like, oh my God, I have to save starving kids. Like, that's my life. Donate. So I got a degree in international studies. I studied abroad in Ghana, and I realized that all the same problems that are happening abroad are happening here. And who am I to go to another country and say, I'm going to help you? So I had this moment when I was there watching the waves in the ocean and just sitting there, and I said, tell me what my life's about. Like, I got to find that thing. And I came back and I got pregnant. And so I had a child, and through that process, I discovered nutrition. And through that process, I discovered tending the earth. So for the last 6 years, I've been on a journey with some friends. We built an organization called Kiss the Ground, and it's all about inspiring regeneration of the planet. And so we support farmers, we have a scholarship program for farmers, we do education work, we have online courses and curriculum, and help inspire people. A lot of big brands, we work with a lot of big companies in the food system and how they can invest in healthy soils and regenerative agriculture.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Gabe, why don't you tell us how you're showing up in the world?
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to the talk. I'm Gabriel Lopez. So what I do is I have an organization called Anastasia USA. We promote the idea of something called a kin's domain. And a kin's domain is 2.5 acres of land where a family goes to build, a home for their kin, right? The domain of their kin. So they take 2.5 acres of land. You can see a little picture here, like right there on the bottom. Plant a forest, dig a pond, plant an orchard, build a house, and plan to pass that land down generationally for people to inherit. and they do that together. It's an idea that came out of Russia. Currently, the largest settlements of Kins domains are more than 350 families. They have been around more than 20 years, the oldest ones, the largest and oldest ones. Children are being born there. I said there's more than 650 of them total, so you can imagine they're pretty big, and the idea is just growing and spreading, and people in Russia are actually getting support from the Russian government and getting land doing this. And so these books were translated into English, and many people have read them, and so I'm helping organize readers of those books who are wanting to start those communities and provide, let me just give you a story. Like, I have a friend, his wife and him in Australia read the books, and they're trying to build their Kins domain for their children and then start a settlement of other people doing it. And they planted 450 trees, just them two. And that's not even for the entire thing. That's just for the perimeter. And so that's one family, 450 trees. Now you can imagine 300 families doing that, 450 trees just for the perimeter. And that's a lot, and that's real change that's happening. And so I'm helping to organize this movement of people who are trying to build these kinds of settlements in the United States, English-speaking countries. So we have a website, we have like a listing technology where you can see the people who are doing this and connect with them. We do events, there's educational material on the website, and we're just trying to connect people and build this idea, because it's all about families, it's about regenerating the earth, and that's what I do.
Thank you, Gabe. Bryan, tell us about yourself and NuMundo.
So my name's Bryan Tucker, and I'm a core team member of NuMundo. I was around when the company first started. So we are a really exciting platform. I like to say that we're similar to Airbnb, but we're like the Airbnb of eco-villages. So you go online, NuMundo.org, you see a beautiful map, and you can go all around the world and find centers where you can volunteer, you can stay, you can take classes, and all of the centers on the platform have a really amazing ecological, positive impact. So that's been amazing. And then I also co-founded a company called Earth Journeys. So we have been active for the past couple of years in Southern California, hosting pretty much collaboration circles, mostly for people who want to start businesses that have a positive impact. And our flagship offering historically, we don't do it anymore, has been the Sustainable Living Tour. So we had this really amazing bus tour. It was 12 days, and we took people to our favorite permaculture and land regeneration projects in the area. So that was just amazing. And last bit about me, I've been more of like a marketer for Earth Stewards. That's been my primary role. So quick story. I've lived at these different, sustainability education centers for the past 7 years. My favorite one was in Ojai, and we helped them sell permaculture courses, and then that money they used to build a rainwater catchment pond, basically. So they're able to now store 1 million gallons of water every year just from the rain. So just amazing, example of what's possible if you know what's possible.
Cool. Bryan, we're going to stay with you and I'll work back. So NuMundo, it's interesting you compared NuMundo to Airbnb, one of these .com unicorns is what they're known as. And so you guys have the potential to become a unicorn. So talk to us about cryptocurrency and the new levels that you kind of are stacking on top of just the stewardship itself in order to kind of integrate it into what the future is going to be with technology and everything.
Yeah, so NuMundo is currently working on our own cryptocurrency, our own coin. To be honest, I'm really not the thought leader in the company behind the coin. I've heard different stories about how it'll incentivize people within our network to earn this coin by participating at these different eco communities, and then it's just gonna promote the regeneration of land through the use of it, and it'll be like a regional network. I don't know if David told you more details, but really, the story changes every month, so that's the extent of which I know.
Well, yeah, as tech is, it's constantly changing. Exactly right. Moving over to Gabe. So Gabe, your organization is called Anastasia USA. Tell us who Anastasia is and how people can learn more about her.
Such a good question, buddy. Wes is one of my best friends in the world, so just putting that out there. I'm super happy to be here with him. Anastasia, interesting, right? Why does a Puerto Rican guy have an organization called Anastasia USA? Super interesting. That happened because there's a series of books, like I said, The Ringing Cedars of Russia. This is the 4th one, there's 10 of them. It's a true story. There is a entrepreneur from Russia who went to Russia, was doing some trading stuff in the high northern Siberian rivers on a boat. He met a woman named Anastasia who's a representative of a civilization that is thousands of years old, that lives kind of separately from ours, and she has a lot of knowledge and abilities, and shared a lot of things with him to share with the people. And you know, she gave a lot of really great ideas, and so you can say she's real, she's not real. I think she's real. Anyway, these books sold 10 million copies without a single dollar spent on advertising, translated into over 20 languages, and without any support, people are going and acting on the ideas that were in the book, which is really just regenerating the land, like in the most positive way you can. People are taking marginal lands and just straight building paradises on them, and it's really happening. And so, Anastasia is somebody who brought these ideas to this author. His name is Vladimir, and yeah, you know, she's a pretty good person, I'd say, you know. Yeah.
So, okay.
Sure.
We'll come back to her.
Okay. Cool.
Lauren, you're very humble in sort of how Kiss the Ground came around. Why don't you take us back to the successful for-profit venture that actually, because it was successful, allowed for Kiss the Ground? Because I think that's something that we can include into stewardship. It's like you can think corporately to and apply it to the earth, or somehow, you know, close these systems so they get back.
Yeah, sure. So 2 of my good friends founded Kiss the Ground, and one is Ryland Engelhardt, and his family started Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre. So all organic vegan restaurant chain here in California. And Ryland actually flew to New Zealand to speak about sacred commerce, which is a style of doing business that their family has termed for what they're doing. Because one of the intentions of the restaurants is to develop people, both the people that come in as well as the staff. So it's a developmental attempt inside of a business. And so Ryland flew to New Zealand to talk about sacred commerce, spoke on a panel, and then went and heard a panel on the viability of life on planet Earth, very, you know, mild topic. And there were 6 panelists speaking, and 5 of them were like, that's it, go hang out with your family, like, we got 10 years, you know, it's pretty bad. And there was one guy by the name of Graham Sate, he's become a good friend of ours, and he spoke about soil carbon sequestration. And for Ryland, he, you know, grew up on a farm, his family is really leaders in the vegan organic space, and he had never heard of soil carbon sequestration. And he was like, this is crazy. Plants actually breathe carbon, and the way we farm can actually contribute positively to the planet instead of take from the planet. And so he came back from New Zealand and he was like, my life is different. This is now my mission. And so he started talking to all his friends, including myself, and anyone who listened. So we started gathering in his living room. And at this moment we can say, you know, one of the things that creates success and forward momentum is just showing up. And so we've met every Monday for the last 6 years. And that's part of our story and part of our success.
And moving into the future of Kiss the Ground, in addition to the you know, hands and feet on the ground working with the seeds and the plants, is there also a media component happening? Because I think I was on the boardwalk the other day and I saw Josh Tickle shooting Rosario Dawson, and they're wearing Kiss the Ground shirts. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when we first started, we said, we want to tell the world. because we just found out something that we didn't know. So like, how do we tell everyone? So the first thing we did was create a very short video called The Soil Story. And then we started a garden for the community in Venice Beach, which is where we lived at the time. And then from there, it spawned into educational programs and working with farmers and the whole thing. But also, we have friends who are filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca. They live in Ojai. And they've been working with us for the last 4 years to birth a documentary. And I say birth because it's really been that process. But there's a book out called Kiss the Ground that Josh wrote, which is the story of filming. It's a really beautiful book about regenerative agriculture and this movement. And then the film itself it's almost complete, and it's about soil and climate and farmers who are leading regenerative agriculture here in the US. But we had a big meeting last Friday. We all sat together because the film is a little stuck. There's something magical that's missing from it. And we had this long conversation about, does it really have to be about climate change, or can it actually be about regeneration and biodiversity? Can that be the through line? And can we pull back the climate change language a little? So that's my hope for the film in this moment, because we're seeing that the more we talk about the big picture, it's just inclusive. Like the UN report that just came out about biodiversity, they're like, hey guys, planet's dying. Like, what's the easiest way, most relatable way to say this? And it's like, a million species dying. And so whether you're Democrat, Republican, believe in climate change, you don't, no matter where you sit on the planet, like birds dying, fish dying, insects dying, us dying, it's like frightening. And I also think it's unifying. So that's what
I think I really would agree with the pivot to move the focus away from quote unquote climate change, because that is such a trigger for some people. And in order to make this information available to the broadest audience, you have to use nonviolent communication. And I do feel like environmentalism has kind of had to take a back seat to quote-unquote climate, whereas environmentalism back in the 60s and 70s was self-evident. You could say this water's polluted, I can prove it, it's there. Whereas climate is a little bit more amorphous, and it's literally a platform of argument. So I think that's a smart pivot, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the film.
Yeah, and for me, the coolest thing about the regenerative movement and the environmental movement that I'm seeing today is that we've totally flipped the story, right? Because it used to be all about do less harm. Don't bike, bike to work. Don't drive. Don't do this. Don't buy that. Don't support that corporation. And now I think we're starting to flip it to do more. Like, actually, we want you to participate more. We want you to compost. We want you to dig in the dirt. We want you to plant trees. We want you to, become an Earth steward.
That's great. That's great, and that's actually perfect segue into what the Anastasia movement talks about. Gabe, why don't you tell us about how these personal kin domains compete against the large ag corporation, the ag companies in Russia?
Okay, so that's a really interesting thing. So basically in Russia, the statistics I might not get 100%, but basically on 8% of the agricultural land in Russia, more than 50% of the food is produced by small backyard farmers. And that's like a staggering statistic. And it's generally pretty clean produce. They ban GMOs and a bunch of things. But I want to also talk about what you're talking about, like the holistic thing, not just talking about climate change, but all of it kind of wrapped together. These KINS domains are amazing because what people are doing, they're thinking about the future of their families and what people are gonna, what is our legacy, right? I'm gonna leave this land that I created for my family, for them to inherit. While they're doing that, they're planting a bunch of trees, they are providing their own food, they are, they're creating a new social order, because you have 300 of these next to each other. Now you have a community now, and this community is a super value aligned community, and these people aren't hurting each other, and they're not doing crazy things, and they're hitting all the nails on the head as far as sustainability and regeneration. And you know, I've been there, I've seen it with my own eyes. They're educating their own children. Their children are super intelligent, super kind. You know, people have problems. It's not a paradise, but you know, they're doing really well. And so I hope that makes some sense. I hope that was relevant.
But tell us about how sort of the Western belief is conservation, whereas what you guys are doing is more stewardship, where you're actually stewarding the land, and not just abandoning it and preserving it, but actually working with it and improving it.
So one idea that I really think, that I really just resonate with is someone who controls your land and your food controls your life. Right? If someone controls your land and your food, they can subject you to certain conditions to give you access to land and food. So if you take back control of your land and food, you've taken back most of the game. And so instead of, you know, just conservation and everything, people are like, they are just creating something that they want to give to, you know, their families. Is that more like, yeah, please.
So in California, I've been learning a lot about our history, something that I'm not Californian, I didn't know. And our land history is fascinating here. So when settlers came, they saw paradise, right? They were like, this place is amazing, it's biodiverse, it's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet is California, and one of the most unique ecosystems. There's only a couple other places in the Mediterranean like California. And so when we get all these John Muir quotes, he was actually quoting something that was starting to degrade because native peoples had come off the land already. And what we didn't realize as outsiders coming into California is that California was actually heavily tended, and that it was a very intimate relationship between the people who lived here and the land. And a lot of California was planted. Also, the way we're starting to think the rainforest may have been planted.
Because there's a lot of really interesting stuff about that. They say it's one giant food forest that might have been planted intentionally over thousands of years. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, as I learn about this history, I'm starting to understand that we really went wrong when we said, let's conserve things. Because we basically said, oh, this place is pristine, let's fence it off and not let people go there. But actually, a lot of health on this planet in the past was a combination of animals, plants, and humans working together. And so that's the flip from do less harm, conserve, to become an earth steward.
Right, so instead of leave no trace, actually intentionally leave a trace.
So on my business card, I have a statement that says perfect the dwelling land. And it's the statement of kind of the task that we are charged with at the moment, which is the land that we have, that we are responsible for. We have to take it and improve it, and not only leave no trace, but leave a positive trace. And then, you know, exactly like what you were saying, John Muir came and he was freaking out. And you read those quotes, the guy was totally freaking out. And he's like, most beautiful thing I've ever seen, blah, blah. Yeah, and it's like, that was just a fraction of what was, you know? And so I've seen these places where people are doing this, and they're doing it so each and every, like for example, if you have 2.5 acres for your family, that's a manageable space for a family, you know, a couple individuals to take care of. So you have a very deep relationship with that land. You are planting those trees with your own hands, and you are, you know, taking care of those plants and all those things, and you come to have a connection with that land. It's yours, and it's a piece of you, and you're a piece of it, and you have this great sense of meaning and fulfillment in life. And so does everybody else around you if you're all doing it. And you know, it changes a lot of things on how we exist in this world.
Bryan, moving over to you, please share with us how these new technology platforms and, you know, sort of the shared economy pop-ups and things that are happening, how the data collection and the information sharing and the learning factor, when your guys' network of eco-villages must be huge, and so I imagine you guys are a platform for information sharing, best practices, and anything else you want to talk about before we get into Q&A.
Yeah, so this is really relevant, I think, because as I hear, all of us sharing about how important it is to, tend the land, to regenerate the land that we're on, a question that sparked for me was, okay, but where do we learn? How do we re-skill and gain all of these skills that a couple hundred years ago were just passed on, by families? So, yeah, taking technology in and building a platform that's free to access, like NuMundo.org, allows the ability to identify places where you can learn because people are actually doing it on their land. So it's not just taking an online course and learning the information, but it's meeting face-to-face and building personal relationships with people who are doing the work. And it's a spectrum, right? Not everyone is perfect, not every land project is perfect, but you can kind of find your niche of what your unique skill set or desire to learn can find. We definitely have a vision and a desire to create a network where these centers and these landowners are like sharing information, resources, and knowledge, but we're taking things one step at a time. So for now, we're keeping it pretty simple. Just find where you want to learn. And if I could just throw in another answer for the question that I posed of where do we learn, one route that I found is really easy to dive into is the world of permaculture. And if you haven't heard of permaculture, I would define it as a lens that allows you to see the world of living systems and how it relates to people. So it's like, it's a way of seeing the world and a way of learning how to design systems so that we can regenerate the land and the people. So I know it's kind of a complex answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a quick add to the permaculture thing. Ways to design living systems that require less input over time and are self-sustaining. So, they produce more over time and with less effort.
Yeah, and so that's just one route. Some people love the permaculture movement. Some people love to poke holes in it. That's fine. But within the permaculture movement, there are permaculture design certifications that are 2 weeks long and allow you to just really taste the full spectrum of possibilities of what's possible when we zoom out and see living systems as systems that we can, put inputs into and help regenerate. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you, Bryan. Does anyone have any questions, just general questions or specific questions for NuMundo, the Anastasia movement, the Ringing Cedars of Russia, or Kiss the Ground? Just raise your hand real quick.
We are friendly people.
For the Anastasia movement, is there any concern about introducing invasive plant species to areas that you're trying to permaculture?
Yeah, for sure. I think in general it's best. So actually what I was about to say about the permaculture stuff is if you do a permaculture design certificate, try to take one locally, like in your area, so you're learning how to tend your area, because it's completely different. You can learn how to do gardening here and it will not apply to where I live in Canada. That's just not going to happen. And so, try to learn, what's native to your area and bring back the native plants, and because a lot of that is lost. And so, definitely try to not plant things that are invasive. And I'm not a super expert on that, but that's definitely the way of thinking.
Any other questions or knowledge that, we have probably the smartest audience in the world at this festival. So if you want to share your own, permaculture techniques.
Hello. So I'm really interested in the NuMundo thing that you got going on. And I'm just curious about how do you begin to think about building a separate community system? Where do you start, and what do you think is the heart of the beginning of that process?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, I want to start by saying that I found a trend that there's this idea that of people who want to create self-sufficient communities, so they kind of want to go out into the wilderness and create their own system. But what I found works really well is integrating into pre-existing systems. And so it's maybe you have a lot of your own infrastructure that is self-sustaining, but to say that your little community is going to be completely separate from the rest of the world and it's going to be its own little utopia is a tall order. So I just want to throw that into the conversation. But your question was more around where do you start? I would say with reskilling and with networking, with learning as much as you can and finding the right collaborators, because it's incredibly complex. I mean, land is different everywhere, and you know, to have a superstar team is going to be, you know, it's going to take some work. I would reach out to organizations like Kiss the Ground, who have you know, an amazing network, and just start to find the people who already have the knowledge and can be like, oh, by the way, I have this whole list of land that I think could be a really great spot for a community, etc. That, and just I found that a lot of projects fail because of just social differences, people getting into arguments and, you know, not laying the right groundwork. So finding people you trust and have the same values, and like doing that groundwork before you dive in.
Can I add to that? So from what I've seen, the communities in Russia, like I was saying, some of them more than 300 families, some of the oldest ones, they got started really quickly and didn't lay that groundwork properly, and they just let everybody in who wanted to be part of it. They didn't sit down and get to know each other and get really value aligned about and have agreements about what they wanted to do and what they were going to create, and that caused problems down the line. And now there's, you know, there's the social things, like, yeah, we all want to go and build a paradise, but like, you know, John still doesn't like Jake, you know, and like Jake is still a jerk, and it's like we probably shouldn't have let Jake in because he doesn't believe in it, and now he's like using Miracle Grow, and it's weird. So you know what I mean, you should have vetted that before. And so a lot of that preparation stuff, so one of the things that I want to do as we're building communities in the States is like an application process or something, you know, like an interview process, like sit down and get to know these people. Like if they're going to be your neighbors, you're going to live with them, you should like have dinner and really get to know these people and build those relationships so it doesn't crumble over time. It doesn't get built, it gets built more over time, but it starts like, you got to have it in the beginning.
Next question.
I think this is for Gabriel. As far as where you're doing work in the United States, are you able to tell us a little bit about that or how that's going?
Yeah, sure. So right now the movement in the US is, you know, there's not any large settlements like I was referencing in Russia. There's a lot of people who have land and who are trying to develop that, and so we're trying to give people the outlet for promoting their availability for starting that, like saying I have 3,000, you know, now 1,000 acres of land and we want families. But where it stands currently, there's a lot of people all over the country, all over North America, some who've been living this way. This was published in English in like 2006, I hope, something like that. And people have been living this way for like 10 or 12 years, so they've already got their, you know, but it's not in big communities. Upstate New York has a lot of stuff going on. A lot of families over there have been on their land 8 or 10 years, you know. California, a lot of stuff happening. It's all over the place. The website has information about it. You can get connected there. But yeah, nothing large yet. There's a few communities that came and went actually for the same structural things, the social stuff. People didn't agree. They had, you know, that's a really important piece. So we're trying to educate people about that too, the community building.
Next question. Anybody, comments? Your own advice to this panel, this room?
No pressure.
Okay, right.
Super friendly.
Got another one. So a lot of agricultural farmer knowledge on the stage right now, and I just would like, I'm curious about what someone living in an urban environment, like what would you suggest for them to do to kind of live more in line with the interconnection of nature and humans? Like, how can you, in this limited, cemented space, still feel like you can align with that kind of living style value?
I have a lot of tangible things, but I actually want to go esoteric first. So something I've been really deeply understanding recently is that inner work and outer work are very much the same thing. So the way we tend to ourselves and the people around us, whether that's through counseling or meditation or through group work or through women's circles or men's circles or whatever that looks like, that may be as important as regenerating the planet, because the way we treat each other really matters. And so that's one thing we can 100% do no matter where we are. The other thing is, you know, there's actually always soil underneath our feet, even if there's concrete. So there's a ton of things we can do in a city setting You can grow your own food. You can get together with neighbors and grow your own food. You can compost. And then, you know, you can hook up with networks that are already doing these things and look for the networks in your community, because for sure they already exist. And then you can take our class, like full shameless plug. We're doing an urban regeneration class.
Take the class.
Online. It starts in mid-June.
I like you guys' stuff, man. That's great work.
But yeah, there's so much you can do. Food choices is 100% like no-brainer. And it's not cut and dry. Like, there's no ultimate certification. There's a couple of Regen Ag certifications in the works that are being tested right now, but they're not consumer facing yet. So you can't just, you know, find that thing with the perfect stamp of approval, but I really think it's a relationship. So if you can shop at your farmer's market, and if you can talk to the people as close as you can, get as close as you can to the people who are actually growing your food, and ask questions. Because the more questions farmers hear from customers, they're like, no way, we didn't know people cared. So the more you actually reach out to companies that are purchasing from farmers or from farmers directly, really matters.
Yeah. I've also heard, especially in small urban environments, you may not have a lot of space to have compost piles. So people like using red wriggler worms, like little worm bins, and that helps you build your relationship with your food, watch it slowly decompose, and then use it to, you know, fertilize your garden or your one tree somewhere that you might have.
Yeah, in LA we have composting hubs. So there's some awesome organizations who have set up hubs.
Make
so
soil.
Make Soil's good. LA Compost is another, and you can drop off your food scraps. Also, where we live, we found a service that would come to our office. So they bring bins, people throw everything in the bin, and then they come and collect them. So all those things exist. You just have to find them.
Yeah, and I want to add something too, is number one, don't worry that you're not living on the land or anything like that. Me either, you know, not yet. It's going to happen. But, you know, grow something in your window, man, and just plant a tree. Plant some stuff in your window, get that connection to life, and look for projects around you, people who are trying to improve the city where you live already. If there's anything people are trying to regenerate in any kind of way, you know, green design or any of that type of stuff, get involved. You know, one thing like touching about eco-villages and all that stuff in general is like if everyone runs away to the forest, who cleans up the cities, right? You know, and that's our mess that we're responsible for. We did this, and so we have a responsibility, and so people who live in the city are super valuable, you know, and should get involved in those kinds of ways, and plant community gardens and you know, do all those things.
Yeah, the Anastasia books, when Vladimir, the writer, he confronts Anastasia about this, he's like, what, so everyone should just move to the countryside and abandon the cities? She's like, no, you need to, you know, remodel these cities, redesign these cities. And you can kind of see this beginning to happen in places like Brooklyn and, you know, anywhere where there's rooftop gardens, or even in Detroit, you know, there's a lot of poor neighborhoods that have been turned into gardens.
She said actually that people who run away and abandon the cities and just go in the forest and try to create their paradise are worth even less than the people who are trying to create something beautiful in the city, because that impact is way more impactful. Really super quick story. I lived with an old Sicilian guy. I rented an apartment with him. He had his garden plot in his backyard in the middle of crime all around in the city for 35 years. This guy was like just building the soil, had the most beautiful rose garden I've ever seen, sunflowers, everything. And that man was a saint, you know what I mean? He had real impact in that area, you know, and maybe not everybody saw what he was doing, but he was doing something good. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I know that some developers, I recently met with a developer in Chicago, and we were talking about, you know, how to heal the south side of Chicago. And the best idea on the table was put healing centers on every single block in these poor neighborhoods, whether it's a healthy produce market or Qigong or a yoga studio, and just, you know, infusing the healing to these places that have been extracted from. Gabe, real quick, I know that the Anastasia movement was spawned by the dacha movement, which is something that people who live in urban environments can do, which is basically having weekend gardens in
Yes.
the countryside. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, exactly. So my wife is Russian and her mom has a dacha, so this is very interesting. So the dacha movement was basically the Russian government gave out land, 600-meter square plots in general for people to just go. The people have summer cottages that they travel to in the summer and they just garden all summer long. And that's where the statistic I shared in the beginning of the talk comes from, people producing all this food on these small little pieces of land. And so, yeah, like planting a small little garden, that's fantastic. Like, go and do that. Yeah.
And when the Russian government was giving away land to people, they were giving, inferior land.
Inferior, low-quality land. And these people took to it and they regenerated it with their own hands. They didn't put any pesticides on it because it was for them. They did the best they could, and they built something.
And then I would say that the other, to finish this urban question off, just the single act of composting is the one regenerative thing you can do every single day, So, I'm a big proponent of that. And we got a shout out for makesoil.org.
Make Soil,
which is,
fantastic.
Their whole concept is to create a new role in our vernacular of the soil maker. So you have the baker, you have the banker, you have, the lawyer. We need to have the archetype of the soil maker in every community. So, all right, next question.
Super friendly.
So I've had this crazy idea, like if it would be possible to get like the military to incorporate as part of basic training, like you have to plant a tree to like reforest areas. Are any of these organizations trying to make something like that happen?
I saw the Chinese government deployed.
Yeah, the Green Wall.
And I have a friend who told me around a military installation, like somewhere in Oregon, they're using like sunflowers to pull toxins out of the ground. So, what was the question one more time?
I was going more for like having them plant like native trees, like oak trees or something, and reforesting big areas that are currently deforesting. And if any of these organizations might have some pull in achieving that.
I mean, as far as what we're doing as an educational platform, we would love that. Let's like record you and put that on social media, and like let's do that. I don't know if any of us have gotten there.
Heard of anything.
Yeah, all it takes is meeting the right person. We gotta find a colonel.
It's you, buddy.
Or what's the highest?
General.
Anyone know General Mattis?
There was a talk earlier today in the Beacon by some friends of ours in the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and they were talking about sort of how everything is now being repurposed. So the swords to plows was sort of the vernacular back in the day where the military came back and they turned on their swords into plows, right? So instead of killing, they're cultivating. And I do think that that's where we are in the position where we're starting to repurpose things for solutions. Any other questions?
Yeah.
That's some great indigo you've got on us.
As far as it goes.
So I know we want to regenerate the urban metro centers, but what we're hearing is grassroots solutions, grassroots approaches. Is there anything short of writing letters to, local politicians that can get us networking with? I don't own the city that I want to change. What can I, besides starting community gardens and opening healing centers, what can I do that's more top down?
Yeah, we've actually worked a lot with the city of LA, and there are a lot of groups that are working at a policy level for at least healthy soils for farmers. And yeah, we gathered 22,000 signatures for the Healthy Soils Act when it passed in California, and when we delivered those signatures, the legislature in Sacramento was like, what? They're like, we thought like 5 lobbying groups and like some farmers cared about this. Like, what is this? So it definitely makes a difference. We've walked into City Hall many times and said, hey, we care about this. And they're like, great, we're working on a recomposting legislation, but we're kind of understaffed. Do you want to write some of it? And we're like, yeah, sure, let's write it into law. So it's super easy and accessible, and I think it's just a reminder to do it. Yeah.
What kind of skills would I require to be doing that sort of thing?
I mean, technically you don't need any skills to do it. Legislature, like, they all have open office hours and they're all there to hear our public comment, technically. So if there's something you care about and something in your heart, you can go and share that. Otherwise, I would recommend linking up with groups who are already going. So I live in LA, so I'm really networked there. But in LA, it's LA Food Policy Council has an amazing space for community members to work with legislature, and a bunch of other environmental groups are working on it. So yeah, either way, thank you.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of buzz about the Green New Deal, so that's something you can follow and support. And then there's also the Extinction Rebellion has been doing a lot of really interesting activism around the world, and they have a specific list of demands that they want lawmakers to follow and adhere to that you can see online. So definitely, yeah, write down Extinction Rebellion and Green New Deal.
And I'll add one last thing is political legislation is extremely important for facilitating, these types of regenerative things in the world, eco-villages and, all these things. And in Russia, I said these people started with no support from their government, but just from them doing it, they started a thing called the Family Party. They have people running for office, people getting elected to pass laws. The ultimate goal is to pass a law, which they pretty much already did, to have the Russian government give out 2.5 acres of land to everybody who wants it. And so, I mean, that's what I'm going to be working on here. We are working on here. It's still small, but, we're doing it. I mean,
any more questions?
As far as it goes.
Like, adding on to that though, like, as far as collaborating and figuring out who do I go to, how do I do it, how do I approach it, you don't have to go as far as like city, city government or even higher than that. There's local government, there's tribal governments. Collaborating with tribes is a big thing, especially in California. I'm not sure about everywhere else, but your tribal government. Arizona, so Region 9, EPA's Region 9 would include Arizona, Nevada, and California. So there's 158 federally recognized tribes that are part of that region. They all have environmental departments.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, sure.
Try and keep my walkie-talkie out of it. I was wondering, as far as the kinship program, what does it look like to take a piece of land that has had the trees taken away from it for a long, long time, and the life basically taken away from it for a long, long time, and bring that back? Like, is that part of the work that you're doing, educating folks on ways to remediate, I guess, from human destruction, really?
Yeah, so in general, like, permaculture is a really good place to start about learning how to do things like that. Kiss the Ground, I'm sure, has some fantastic material about that. I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, in general, what I can say is being done is, yes, we don't directly teach the gardening techniques and stuff like that. We kind of push people to where they can learn those things, but that's definitely a thing. And, like I'm saying, people are taking lands that aren't A+ lands. They're taking like D- C- C+ lands and regenerating those. And, I have a friend, this isn't exactly a Kins domain thing, but a guy up in Montreal, Valhalla Farms in Montreal, they took a GMO cornfield and straight now it's a giant permaculture oasis. And that's like, it's real, and they did that. So I'm not exactly sure where they learned everything how to do that, but permaculture has a lot of answers, biodynamics and all those things, yeah.
Hemp.
I think it's also climate specific, so I would find someone locally who's doing it. Like, one of my favorite examples is Quail Springs. They're probably, like 2 hours away from us, from where we are right now. And like, they're in the high desert. They have very little access to water, but they have a small food forest going. And I think the stat is that when they first got the land, their stream was flowing at a rate of 3 gallons per minute, and now they have recorded examples of it flowing of up to 60 gallons per minute. minute because they've been doing watershed restoration techniques, which is literally as simple as like moving boulders and creating specific formations of dams. So you're just moving earth, but if you're moving it in a way that mimics the natural pattern that a river wants to flow, you can bring it back to that pattern and help the water regenerate. So that's like a little example where if I was doing something out here, I'd want to go to Quail Springs and learn everything, learn their techniques for this type of climate.
Yeah, there's, I want to make a distinction between practices and principles. So you can learn practices from someone in your local community who's going to understand what crop to plant, when to plant it, what it likes, what works in this climate zone, those type of things. But the principles are pretty universal. We're talking about caring for subsoil microbiology with cover crops or compost, or actually putting compost tea on the land. We're talking about, wood chips. We're talking about planting diversity, so animal, plant, tree, bush, annual, perennial. And we're talking about not using chemicals. So it's the principles and the practices. You can take a course, a permaculture course or regenerative ag course, and those are going to teach you a lot of principles. And then you want to find that local who's been doing it a long time to teach you the very specific practices that work in your region.
Two things.
Super well said.
Yeah, good answer.
Two things that I would add to that are, you're probably familiar with Paul Stamets, who's here at the festival, and he's sort of was put on the map when he took the challenge of cleaning up an oil spill. And all he did, there was a contest, and they asked all these different scientists to clean up oil spills, and what he did with his little patch was just throw mushroom spores down and then tarp it for several weeks. And then when he came back and pulled off the tarp, the soil had no trace of the oil, and the mushrooms that had grown there had very, 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 very trace levels of the oil spill left.
It's on YouTube. It's fantastic. And also Graham Sate, who you mentioned earlier, that's a really good guy to check out on YouTube. Inspired me a lot.
And then one practical solution that's offered in the Anastasia books is she tells us that when you're planting your garden, take each seed and put it in your mouth first. And what happens is the seed is a part of nature, and it wants to complement you and help you just like your dog does. That's how she describes nature. And so when he challenges her, he's like, well, what do you mean put it in your mouth? How does that help it? And she says, well, when the seed grows and it fruits, it knows your biology, so it'll complement your biology. And so the writer took this information back to established science and asked scientists, does this make any sense to put seeds in your mouth? And scientists were like, well, yeah, in order to germinate, it needs heat and moisture, which is the exact thing that your mouth is. So anything you want to add to that, Gabe?
And it has your DNA. And so the seed is getting imprinted with all your DNA in the exact condition of your body at that point. And then when it grows, it is growing according to those conditions that it's taken in. And so it's growing for you. And so you plant that little seed. I've eaten plants that I've planted that way. It was unbelievable. I'm not even joking. Like I ate a tomato that way, and my whole body was like rushed with energy. My head, I could think clearer immediately. And she posits that could heal any type of disease, and I can imagine it can.
Yeah, I've seen family gardens where the family all does that, and you'll see different family members, the plants will be different heights and sizes.
Completely.
Because they're needing different things. I have chills. It's amazing. Yeah.
And they've done studies where and you can do this yourself with your houseplants. You can name half your houseplants and don't name the other half, and see if there's a difference in their growth. And I've done this, and the named plants will grow much bigger.
This is so good.
Any other? Yeah, I got a question out there? No? Any other questions?
Actually, can you repeat some of the names? Like this guy's on YouTube. Really quick.
Graham Sate, S-A-I-T. He's from New Zealand. Who else? Paul Stamets, amazing. Jeff Lawton has a free permaculture course, which is fantastic. Oregon State University has some amazing stuff in permaculture. Any of the Kids to Ground folks, I'm sure you guys have got some amazing stuff on there.
We have a bunch of online courses.
Yeah, exactly. Take those. Who else is really good? Names? Oh, Paul Gauci, the Back to Eden method. That's amazing for building soil and getting rid of like watering problems and all types of amazing things. Biodynamics, yeah, that's amazing. God.
It's unlimited.
Yeah.
I really need so much more.
Yeah, Bill Mollison.
Thank you.
Yep.
One book leads to like 15. It's dangerous.
It's the best thing to learn about.
And I think really the message here is there's no greater reward than growing your own food and knowing where that comes from. You really step into your godhood when you're working with the life force and the earth, right? You're literally creating life and growing life. This is divine.
It knows you and you know it, you know? And now you have a connection. Now, like, your spirituality is a real thing because you have a connection with the living universe around you, you know?
It's practical
You're
spirituality.
creating life.
Any more questions out there? Anything else you guys want to add on the end of this?
Speaking of resources, so NuMundo is the company that we were talking about that I work at. So we are coming also out with an online course in about a month, and it pretty much helps you plan your journey to go find the skill sets that you want. So if you do feel called to kind of like travel the world and you need to go do that for yourself, we pretty much teach you how to plan a journey from beginning to end. So just want to throw that out there.
Add some amazing eco-villages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no greater education than traveling, for sure.
Guys, are we at time?
How are we doing on time?
Excellent.
3 minutes.
So we got 3 minutes, so we can run over to Stamets.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I mean,
Friendliest group of individuals ever.
we're not afraid to wrap early, so we can all go over
See
to the
Paul
beacon
Stamets,
and,
that's also true.
and see what they're calling radical
Yeah, we
Earth
got
Stewardship. This
Earth
was
Stewardship.
just basic Earth
Yeah,
Stewardship.
that's
Over
radical
there.
Earth Stewardship.
Over there. So
Rad.
thank you guys so much for coming, and feel free to pull us aside if you want to. Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you all. And thank you to these amazing panelists.
Yeah, thank you.
Wesley.